Hi, I am Tina Walker, and today I'm going to show you how I created my mixed media layout for Shimmerz. I use several products, and I'll walk that through when I go through the video. So this is the layout that I'm going to show you how I created the background, and then I'll just walk you through the steps. So the first thing I did was take a piece of 12 by 12 chipboard. I use that for my mixed media layouts because the paper doesn't warp and everything, and then it's a blank canvas and you can really do whatever you want. So I'm going to first prime my chipboard with some gesso. So that's what I'm pulling out right now, is just some white gesso. I use white gesso sometimes I use clear, but today I'm going to go ahead and use white. You can see me just pouring some right onto the chipboard. You can get this chipboard at your local hobby store. You can get it online. I buy it by the bulk because I do use it quite often. And I'm just spreading it out with just an old credit card. I like the different texture that you get from that instead of the brush strokes, and I'm not being super specific on how it goes on. I just want to make sure that I'm covering the whole background. And again, some areas are thicker than others. So I'm going to zap it really quick with my heat gun and make sure that that's dry before I move on to the next step. So now I'm just taking a 6x6 Crafters Workshop stencil, and I like this one because there were several patterns. You can see there's 9 different patterns in the stencil, and I'm taping it down, and I'm taping it down because I'm going to apply different colors of mediums to this, and I really didn't want to have to worry about holding it down, so I'm just using artist tape to tape it right onto my chipboard. And now I'm going to just rip up some spare pieces of paper and use that as a mask on the outside so the product doesn't get on the background. So I'm going for kind of like an ombre effect. That's kind of what I was looking for when I first started this. So the first thing I pulled out was Dreamscicle, or Dazzlers and Dreamscicle. Oh my gosh, I really cannot speak today. And I'm putting that on several of the squares, and I alternated for this section between Dazzlers and Texturez, and I wanted the different textures on this part of my background. So the smoothness from the Dazzlers and the kind of the rough grittiness of the textures alternating with each other. And then I even pulled in some of the Dimensionz paint as well. I didn't have the color I was really wanting to use here, so I had this color, Copperhead, in Dimensionz, and I thought it was perfect for that. So I went ahead and just squirted some out on a piece of paper and put it down in that center square. So now I'm going to go on to the next row, and now I am using some textures. This is crushed coral that I'm using. And you can see me, I'm putting it on that square, but I actually go back later on and put it on the square to the left. And then in the center, I use Tutti Frutti for the Dazzlers. Then in the bottom, I used Foiled Again, which is Dazzlers, and Tidy Widy textures in the center. So I kind of sped it ahead right there so you wouldn't have to sit here and be bored watching me put it down. So when I'm done with all that, I'm just removing the paper masks that I have and removing the tape off the stencil. And when I lift the stencil up, you'll see kind of the awesomeness that all of this wonderful Dazzlers and textures created on the background. And I'm going to go clean my stencil off really quick because I just don't want that drying on my stencil. Now I wanted to add a little bit more texture to the bottom of my page, so I just pulled out, this is a Tim Holtz stencil, and I'm using some more of the Dimensionz. I don't have the white color in the Dazzlers, so I'm using Pearly Dimensionz, and it works perfectly. Again, just kind of make your stash go even further. So I let that dry overnight. I actually didn't heat gun it. I just kind of set it aside and let it dry. So now I want to add more color and more texture to my background. So I'm going to use some of the new products that we have at Shimmerz, which is Inklingz, and this is a solid watercolor, which is amazing. Comes in 3 different colorways. There's a pearl, there's a metallic, and there's a gold. And I'm primarily using some pearl colors here, and I do use some metal for the silver color, but you can see me, I just sprayed some water right into the little paint pot, so let it set for a couple minutes to let it soften up a little bit, and I'm just dabbing it onto my background. The top layer right there, I'm using the Pearl Sun-Kissed Inklingz. And for the second layer, I'm using Pinkaboo, which is Pearl as well. And again, you can see me not being super specific. I'm just wetting it and dabbing it right onto my background. And I'm being actually very liberal with water. And you can see me right there spraying more water onto it. And that's just really blending the colors together. And using the chipboard as your background, you don't have to really worry about saturating too much. I mean, it can get too wet, but with the amount of wetness and product that I have on here, and with the priming of the gesso, my background withheld all of this water. And you can see the last color there that I'm using is No One's Chrome, which is a metallic Inklingz. So I'm now just kind of letting it drip down my page and adding more water, more color. I went through this several times and just kept adding on top of each other. I would let it dry or zap it with my heat gun in between and let the colors blend. Now I am putting some color to the bottom area, that little stencil mark right there, and I'm using Spotlight White, which is one of the Pearl Inklingz down at the bottom. And you can see that chrome color kind of blending into that, and I'm okay with that. I like that blendingness. I didn't really want stark one color to another. I liked how they blended together. So you can see this was the first layer, and then I kept adding more layers on top of more layers, adding more water, more colors. I just kept using the same colors, extending it out. I wasn't sure when I first started this how I wanted the end result to be. I initially thought maybe I would make the focal piece that textured area up in the top center, but I kept adding the Inklingz because I really liked that pearly color that it was adding to the background. So you can see on the top I kept extending those colors down further and further, and as the video goes on, it ended up covering the entire background with the Inklingz. I really loved that shimmer that you got on the background, but yet it was a subtle effect. It wasn't really taking away from that main area at the top center of my page. And this product is awesome because you can see me here. I'm just layering it actually on top of each other, and again letting it blend with each other, using water to blend it either with my brush or spraying water right on, spritzing water right onto the page. It blends beautifully together. So this is where I start filling in the whole background when I decided I really just didn't want to keep it all at the top. I was loving it so much I wanted just to fill in the whole background. So I'm using more of that Spotlight White on the bottom and more of the No One's Chrome right there in the lower bottom, and then just blending them together. Now once I was done with this, I let it dry, zapped it really good with my heat gun, made sure it was completely dry, dabbed off any of the areas. And I wanted a little more vibrancy, so I took a couple of my sprays and added them on top of where the texture was at the top. So that first color that I sprayed up there was Caribbean Sunset, which is a Spritz color, and the one underneath I'm using Bed of Roses, which is Spritz too. And then adding water to let them blend, and I'm letting the colors kind of seep down in between all those cracks and goodness that was created with the stencil. And you can see that in some areas it's darker, in some areas it's lighter, and I really liked that look. And at the bottom there, I'm using, just a second, I was spraying it with a Shimmeringz, the concrete. Just again, it added a subtleness to that gray area, but I didn't want that real bright. I wanted the focus to be that peachy, corally color with that fuchsia red color. So once I was completely happy with how that turned out, I just set it aside, made sure it was completely dry. Now I'm working on one of my embellishments, and this is a flower chipboard piece that I had. So I'm just covering it with some gesso again. I'm just prepping the chipboard so I can apply some sprays. And I use the same colors that I used on my background. So once the chipboard's on and I heat it with the heat gun, made sure it was dry, I started spraying it to add some colors, and I wanted it to match the background, so I used the same colors. And that's what's so perfect about chipboard and just putting gesso. You can make everything match for no matter what type of layout you want. So I'm just masking off where the leaf areas were because I didn't want to make them pink and coral colored. So you can see me just adding some colors on there, adding some water to blend them, and then I would heat it, make sure it's dry. And I did this actually several times, just keep building up that color, make sure I was happy with it. And then I did the same with the leaves, so you can see me mask off the flower there, and I'm adding the green onto the leaves, and I'm using Hermit the Frog Vibez for the leaf color. And that was it to create my embellishment. And my camera actually died on me there, so it didn't. You didn't get to see me finish putting my layout together. I'm almost done here. I have a few pieces left. I kind of had it. I didn't realize it had actually died, and I kept putting my layout together and glued it all down, other than these last few pieces. So I've got all the embellishments down. I'm just working on the last little bit right here. So I took some of my deli paper that I had, and I used that for my jelly prints, but I also use it in place of vellum and things like that on layouts, just to add more texture, or if you have a really busy background, you can lay it on top of that, and it really softens that look, but you still get some of that pattern and color behind it. So I thought it would be fun just to add a strip or two of it along the left side of my layout, just to add some texture and interest to the page. So there I'm just gluing it down. I'm using vellum, a vellum tape runner, so you can't see it through the deli paper, and just lining it up. And then I had another strip that I just laid on top of it. That strip right there. I'm just gluing all of that down. So now what I did to really hold that down well, and again, just to add more texture and more interest to that side, I just took some of the twine that I had, and I just stitching an X at the top and an X at the bottom. So I punched the 4 holes where the X would be with my my sharp tool right through the chipboard. Got to be careful. I actually did stab myself when I was doing this. And I'm just stitching that X right through the chipboard and through that deli paper. You have to kind of force the needle through because it is pretty thick, but it went through there pretty well. So you can see there I've got both my X's down on my page. So now I'm just finishing my layout and putting the rest of my title on. Those are just some small little alphas that I'm adding to my layout, and that is done. So I hope you enjoyed my tutorial today, and I would love to know what you thought about my first one for Shimmerz, and I look forward to my tutorial for you next month. Thanks for stopping by.